Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So yes, as Christina said, today I'm going to talk about the future of social media. And this is probably about the fifth or sixth webinar I've done with the team at Iconic, which is great. But I have to say, in kind of prepping for it and deciding what to say, probably one of the most tricky, because there is so much to say about where social media is now, where it's going, and of course there's so many platforms. So you know, as we go through today, I'm going to try and touch on as much as I can, but I'm going to focus on the bigger platforms, so the Facebook, LinkedIn, rather than perhaps some of the smaller ones like Pinterest of the world. So hopefully there's going to be something in here for everyone. If you've got any questions, please do put them in the chat box. I will try and get to as many as I can as we go through. But as Christina said, this is going to be recorded. I am going to also make the slides available as well. So there's, you know, stacks of data in there. So if you feel like you need to kind of justify something to, you know, maybe your team or your bosses about why you're doing something, there's going to be some data in there to back it up, and the sources as well. So it's not just data that's been plucked out of thin air. It's credible marketing information for you to use. So without further ado, just a kind of scene set, it has been a funny old year for us marketers. Let's face it, we rewind to the beginning of 2020, we would have had probably a marketing budget, a marketing plan of things that we were going to do throughout the year. And then budgets were cut in a lot of instances. Let's say it depends on the industry that you're in. But for many companies, budgets were cut and potentially haven't quite recovered for you. So, you know, maybe you are in the situation where, you know, you're trying to really measure that ROI, make your marketing get biggest bang for buck it possibly could have. And our priorities changed as well. So, you know, it might have been very much about kind of business growth last year, whereas now we might be shifting to, you know, steadying the ship, and it's about customer retention rather than growth. So, you know, just tune into that a little bit as well, about where you're planning your future and your strategy, but have your priorities changed? You know, and that's okay if they have, because let's face it, we're going through, you know, something that none of us have seen before in our marketing careers, let alone our personal lives. So so businesses, we've kind of pivoted, haven't necessarily adjusted our strategies to match. Attitudes to the marketing function have possibly changed over the last year. I would like to argue for the better, and I hope that people will see that how we as marketers have responded, and you have responded, particularly if you're in charge of your company's social media, how you responded to, you know, everything that happened. Because let's face it, it was so pacey last year. You know, there was announcement, there was lockdown, so you might have planned your content well in advance, and then potentially had to shelve it and be able to respond to everything so quickly. So people seem to go back to the drawing board, but they didn't necessarily have to do that. They maybe just had to switch a little bit and think about, okay, well, what can we be doing? And then just kind of take a breath and pause before, you know, scrapping plans and thinking about, okay, well, as I said, what's our strategy now, and how does social feed into that? So before we get really into kind of the how does this impact you and what does it mean, I thought it would be useful to just have a quick look at the social landscape. So looking at, you know, what the biggest platforms are, who's using what. Now, sometimes if I was in a room with people and doing this, you know, face to face, I would kind of ask everybody to stand up and then go through the platforms and ask people to sit down if they'd used them. And very quickly, everyone would be sat back down, just as kind of an indicator of how much we use social media, whether we class it as that or not. So interestingly, WhatsApp and Messenger are classed as social media platforms because they're linked to social media. You can advertise in them. YouTube as well, classed as a social media platform. And it's not always one we would think of that way. We tend to think of Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, etc. as being the biggest platforms, but these kind of feature in there too. So far and away, you can see the biggest are YouTube and Facebook. We saw a big uptick in usage of social media over the last 12 months, which is probably unsurprising if you think we were all at home, you had very little to do. we wanted to stay in touch with everyone, our friends and family. We wanted to find out the news as it happened, you know, whether we could go out, whether pubs and restaurants were opening again. So we kind of saw a bit of a curve that went like that. That has stabilized now. So I suppose the biggest change that I would say to be aware of is if you are marketing to, and I'm not always a big fan of this term, but the boomer generation. So if you're kind of marketing to more mature consumers, shall we say, these people have come online and come onto social media and they have stayed. So that's probably the biggest change that we've seen. Whereas for sort of younger generations, millennials, Gen Z, you know, they were always early adopters of these platforms. That's kind of gone up and stabilized. Whereas, as I say, the more mature generation have come on board to stay. So on average, we spend about 2.5 to 3 hours online every day. So, and that's kind of consumer wide. If you break that down, let's face it, into, you know, sort of working age bracket, it's going to be a lot more than that. What I found quite interesting, and this is not the easiest slide to read, but again, I can, you know, share these slides with you, but I just thought it was really interesting to see, compared globally, how much time we all spend on social media. And, you know, this is a quite up-to-date piece of data. It comes from a company called Global Web Index. So if you're a bit of a data freak, data geek like me, you know, we're a riot at dinner parties, but we know our stats. So they're really useful for giving you some good data. So you can see here, and I've just picked out the UK and Ireland, so I know that we have a nice global audience that come through from the iconic webinars. So if I'm hiding your stats and you're in Brazil or Romania, apologies, but I can take these indicators off. So we're kind of on par at spending anywhere between 1 hour and 3/4 to 2 hours on social media per day. Gone up slightly for Ireland. If I remember, and I can just move where we are, it has dropped down slightly for the UK. So, but not a huge amount. We're talking kind of 5 or 6 minutes here or there. So, you know, if you're looking to kind of justify how much time you as a business or as a marketer should spend on social media, well, if people are spending 2 hours of their day online as well, it's, you know, it justifies hanging out there. You know, if you're marketing to any of other territories you've got here, you know, let's look, crikey, the Philippines. Who else did I pick out? I remember going through that. So Philippines, Nigeria, Colombia. These people are spending 3.5, 4 hours on social media per day. So it is a lot of time, which I thought was really interesting. So it's worth keeping an eye on that. But as I said, it's sort of plateaued and stabilized over recent years. In terms of changes in the social landscape, I'm sure most of us will recognize these logos here. The only ones that you might be less familiar with are Clubhouse, which I'm going to talk in more detail about later, because that is a big phenomenon and something that's going to impact the future of social media for us all. The logo we've got here, which kind of looks like a music note or the letter D, is TikTok. And depending on what platform you use, we've got the podcast icon here as well. So all of these platforms have seen changes over the last 12 months, over the last 6 months, in fact, and they're going to be changing as we go along. So if I could just pick out a few and some changes that I think would be useful. And as I said, I've got so much data, so I am looking at some notes here, but I want to make sure I get the facts and figures right for you. We are seeing a massive increase in the use of stories. So those of you who are Instagram users particularly, you will know what stories are. So just very quickly for those who don't, it is, if you look at the top of your newsfeed, particularly on Instagram, but you can see it now on Facebook, on Twitter and on LinkedIn, it's in a little circle. And it's content that is what we call ephemeral. So it's kind of fleetingly there for 24 hours and then disappears again. So why is this so important, you might think? It's not generally indexed by an algorithm. The posts aren't indexed by Google, so it doesn't necessarily give you the kind of all-important Google juice, but it is increasingly being consumed. So it's our first port of call. It's right there in the top of the eye line. as consumers, we want quick content. We want to just be able to zip through it and see what's going on. So we're up to now about 500 million daily active users on Instagram. So that's a huge amount. And you always, my sort of benchmark is if something's going well and being well received, other platforms will copy it. So what started over on Instagram, we've seen it on Facebook, probably not a big surprise because Instagram is owned by Facebook, but both LinkedIn and Twitter have introduced stories. Now, the take up here has been slower. So on Twitter, they're called fleets. LinkedIn just call them stories as well. But yes, the take up has been slower, but because the platforms want to persist with this, you might find that on your notifications. So if you think when you go into your platforms in the mornings, what do we all do? We tend to look at the red dot of notifications and find out, if we've been tagged, who's doing what that we know. And LinkedIn will often pick out for you and say, for example, Christina shared a story, or Christina shared a post. So it's encouraging you to look at that. So it's prioritizing that for you. And just as a kind of marketing psychology, that's the sort of consumer behavior that we're seeing. Quick content that we can scroll through quickly. Stories as well. I'm going to come on to talk a little bit about retail and purchasing through social media, but you can now use shops straight from stories as well. So if we think about kind of when we're purchasing things through social media, if you are an e-commerce business, if you're a consumer facing business, a great idea for you to think about embracing stories if you are not already. Also, just focusing on Instagram still, they've got a much better dashboard if you are a business. So as long as you set your profile up to be a professional one, you can get really good insights in there into what's working, who's visiting you, what's been clicked. So, do embrace that, go and have a look, because the stats that I'm giving you, let's face it, they're kind of at a global level. They're at an everyone level. They're not drilling down to industry specific. So always, regardless of what's going on in the world, keep an eye on your insights, keep an eye on your analytics to find out what works for you. Okay, so again, I'm going to come on and talk about that a little bit more at the moment. Twitter, I would say don't ignore that so much, even though it was lower down in the list of social media channels that are popular. It is increasing in popularity, I think, potentially because of our craving for instant news, because of everything that was happening in the States. Let's face it, you had people live tweeting from inside the the Capitol Hill when people were storming the White House. So it's a great place for people to go and get live news. And because we're going on there quite often, if that's where your audience is hanging out, it's a good place to be. So keep that in mind. LinkedIn, still great for a professional audience. So I would say if your audience is B2B and that's where you're focusing, great to keep spending time there. It didn't feature in our list. If I whip back a slide or two, it's lower down. So just the 28% of users in the UK versus up to 80%. But the demographic on there is very much kind of professional working, probably upper level of junior, so junior to mid-level, and tends to be more white collar workers rather than industrial kind of those that are maybe warehouse construction, that type of thing. So if that's your industry, keep an eye on LinkedIn. They are doing a lot more work there to keep us on the platform, so including stories, including hashtags as well. So some of the LinkedIn changes they've added are if you think of your posts, now every hashtag is indexed. So, or the first 3 are indexed. So if you create your post, so for example, yesterday I put one up to say, doing this iconic webinar, here's the link for you to join. I put several hashtags along the bottom. The first 3 are indexed by Google, by the search engines. So, I was putting in there digital marketing, social media, I can't remember the other one, but my post would have been indexed with that on the end. So again, Google is then recognizing that Amanda Davies or whichever company you're from is indexing those posts with those keywords that you need. So don't feel like you can only put 3 hashtags. More than that is fine. It's just the first 3 are the most important. They're indexed, and if you don't use them, you're kind of missing out. Okay, so those are some of the bigger changes at the moment. What else did I want to share with you stat wise? Okay, right, let's move on to trends that you should be stepping into at the moment, particularly. And I think, again, our relationship with social media has very much changed over the last 12 months. If you get it wrong as a brand, people are very happy to call you out on it as well. You know, let's face it, we've all seen people, probably the most recent one that I think people have jumped on board is, certainly in the UK, I don't know if this filters over to Ireland, but we had a big saga over caterpillar cakes. So Marks and Spencer's do a Colin the Caterpillar cake, pretty much mimics in every food supermarket you can get over here. But they seem to pick on Aldi, which is a budget brand supermarket, and their Cuthbert the Caterpillar. And oh my goodness, it became a Twitter storm. There was lots of free Cuthbert. There was lots of memes going around. So, and then people were jumping to the defense of the budget supermarket to kind of, say, stop picking on Cuthbert. So people, as I say, they're really happy to call you out if you get something wrong. And whilst that might be more lighthearted, if you do something that is not in keeping with the tone or the feeling of the country at the time, then you could get, hopefully not trolled for it, but as I say, people will be quite happy to kind of say, hey, this isn't okay what you're doing. So what you should be stepping into both now and thinking in the future is nurturing the relationships that you've got, adding value as well. So the algorithms, again, we've got a slide that talks about the algorithms in a moment. They are looking at how much time people spend dwelling on your post. So if you think about, we're all very, by the end of the day, we're often kind of, it's Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting. You're all kind of here on this webinar. You'll have meetings after this, I'm sure. So by the end of the day, we're kind of lazy scrolling, one hand with the thumb, scrolling up through our social media feeds. If we pause on a post, so we don't even click on it, but if we pause on a post, they can pick that up in the background. So that kind of, whether something is adding value, whether it is engaging, that's what you're aiming for. So rather than just kind of key message, sales message, we're looking at things in between that kind of, give that warm, fuzzy feeling to our clients, that make them laugh. Use of memes and humor went up 26% between 2019 and 2020. So whilst there is crappy things going on in the world, a lot of the time we go on social media for a bit of light-hearted relief. We might want information, we might want customer service, but let's face it, we all get a little bit distracted by cute dog memes, pandas rolling down a hill in the snow, anything like that seems to fit what we want as consumers. So you're looking for engagement, you're looking potentially to be listening as well. So when we go on social media, we don't want just to be broadcasting, we want to be seeing what's going on in the psyche. You might have heard the tone kind of, heard the term, sense the room. It's kind of, if you walk into a room and you can feel a bit of an atmosphere, you wouldn't go in there and start kind of broadcasting or being really happy and perky if it was a kind of low resonant tone in the room. So read the room, what's going on. So a great example, a couple of weeks ago, the Duke of Edinburgh obviously passed away here. Whilst it didn't necessarily impact a lot of companies, it was a Friday afternoon. It felt inappropriate for people to be kind of doing their woohoo, it's Friday, party, party, party. The tone was all wrong. So, we kind of said to people, you don't necessarily have to acknowledge. So this is the kind of bandwagonitis, what to avoid, bandwagonitis. You didn't have to jump on an event like that in the same way that when it is Pride Month, for example, don't just stick a rainbow over your logo. Again, if it doesn't resonate and work with your company or your culture, people will call you out on it. They'll call out the supermarkets, the big brands, to say, well, that's fine. What are you actually doing to support these causes? So if they're not relevant to you, just kind of, glide on by. So you can acknowledge it and move on, or you just don't acknowledge it at all if it's not relevant to your business. So don't hop on that bandwagon if it's not relevant for you. Okay, so that's what to avoid. And remember your marketing funnels. So whether you're planning in the future and thinking about all these changes on social media, I just want to give a nod to the fact that when you kind of strip it all back, you're thinking about the journey that your potential customers and your existing customers are going on. So it's not necessarily that one Facebook Live or one Clubhouse event will convert all your prospects. You are looking at raising awareness, generating some interest, and then getting that, sort of building that funnel before you get the decision and the action. So, and remember, our jobs as well as marketers, we don't just kind of do the sales funnel at the top, that bit where it almost goes to an hourglass, where you convert them into a customer and then create that advocacy as well. And a lot of social media is about customer service, customer advocacy as well. If you think about where your customers come from, for a lot of you, I'm sure it will be referrals. So it's people tagging those in your customer posts going, hey, this might be interesting for you. So always bring it back to the funnel. Okay, I talked about algorithms and what gains attention in the newsfeed. This has, again, the algorithms do change quite frequently, often without much notice, which is great for us as marketers. When you have no new, all of a sudden something changes in the background. So what I would say is look at the algorithms. What they want are meaningful interactions. So it's all well and good going through and liking other people's posts to get on their radar. Engage with them. So if someone was wanting to sell to me, potentially, they could just like my post. What I would find more valuable is if they engage with it and said, that sounds really interesting. I like the part where you talk about, or I can't make it at this time. Can I get a recording? It kind of gives that warm, fuzzy feeling to the person you're engaging with. So if you're using social media as a business development tool, think about how you can have more meaningful interactions rather than just like. I talked about dwell time. That absolutely matters. LinkedIn, you might have noticed if you're on that platform, has added a reading time. So if someone puts a link to an article, it puts in there whether it anticipates it will take you, excuse me, a minute to read, 5 minutes to read if it's a long form article. Video content. So of course, video is kind of here now. It's not going anywhere in the future. And there was always a bit of a, well, what's the kind of ideal length for a video? 3 minutes is often bandied around, but let's face it, as businesses, we don't often we don't have that much engaging content that could last for 3 minutes. But if you've got a short video that is just maybe a minute or 90 seconds, that dwell time is picked up in the algorithms. So what that means is the next time that person comes on social media, so let's say they were on Facebook kind of goes in the background. Oh, this person kind of hung around on the iconic Facebook page. They dwelled on their post. They obviously engage with that content. I'm going to present it to them more often. So, think about that. What am I trying to say? The captions. So if you are using video, majority of video, I forget the stat now, but it's something like 90% plus of video is used without audio. So by default, whether it's LinkedIn, Twitter, or whatever, the volume isn't on. So having captions and subtitles on your video so people can watch without turning the volume on is really important. There are tools you can use for it. A lot of the platforms are now introducing auto captions. I use something called Rev, which is just REV. It is paid for, but it's super cheap, very effective, and adds captions to your videos. So you're kind of ticking 2 boxes there. One, it just means that people can digest your content more easily. Also, you're ticking a box for inclusivity as well. So if anyone who has a condition that means they are hard of hearing, so you're ticking those boxes as well. So you're making your content more inclusive. So dwell time matters, consistency matters. You're posting regularly. It doesn't mean you need to post all day, every day. So depending on the platform, so if I think about Facebook, LinkedIn, LinkedIn company page, maybe once a day. Facebook, 2 or 3 times a day. There is a point where you'll be seen as spammy. So once you start going above sort of 5 posts a day, also LinkedIn or you know, whether it's Twitter, they don't know which post to present people. So if your audience are only online for that hour and a half or so, if you've put 3 or 4 posts up, it's going to try and pick which one it thinks is the most relevant, or none of them. So just a couple of posts a day is fine, but make sure they're consistent rather than being, you know, once on a Monday, maybe on the weekend. So have that consistency in posting, to the point where people could almost kind of time a watch by what you're doing. So every Thursday with Green Umbrella, we do a live lunch where we go live across Facebook, LinkedIn and YouTube. That's at midday after this. We don't always get a huge amount of viewers, but people know we do it. They can drop in for 10 minutes maybe and say hello, or they'll say, oh, I saw you doing something live. So to the point where they can almost time their watch by it. So they may even just look at it and go, oh, well, I know it's lunchtime now, I'm going to trot off and get a sandwich. But that consistency keeps our brand front of mind. You know, it's something we created at the beginning of lockdown to show people that we were still here, we were available for questions, but that consistency. So whether it's the fact that you always do a post on a Monday afternoon, or a Friday fact, or a special offer, it's something that people can rely on, and we kind of like that consistency and that routine in our life. Facebook is changing their algorithm at the moment, or they're testing it. So one thing, I only read this last week, so you might find yourself as you scroll through Facebook, sometimes they will ask you, is this post relevant? Is this post worthy of your time? And they have rephrased that slightly, because they were asking, is this post worthy of your time? And if we were kind of caught out wasting a bit of time, as I say, maybe watching those dog videos or things that aren't really that relevant, we might say, well, it's not really worthy of my time, but that doesn't mean I didn't find it engaging or inspirational, depending on what it is. So they're tweaking their algorithm to value content that is one of those 3 things: engaging, valuable, or inspirational. So ask yourself that, do your posts tick 1 or even all 3 of those boxes? Facebook are also looking at more controversial content, anything that's triggering content, and seeing about whether it wants to kind of put that lower down the list. So probably less relevant for you as what you're posting, but they've been in the news an awful lot lately for, you know, perhaps being becoming an untrustworthy source, or a place of hate in some people's eyes as well, and facilitating that. So they're looking at whether they can remove more triggering content to make it a more positive place, which I think is an interesting move. So, but I would always say, kind of keep in the back of your mind that EVI, is it engaging, valuable, or inspirational? What works? The best way to trial this, I would say, maybe after this webinar or this evening, as you are scrolling through your social feeds, just take a kind of a moment to notice what makes you stop. So that's the way that we can kind of get a real human, well, I know this works because it works for me. So what makes you stop as you scroll through social media? We know that stock photos are, you know, they're kind of, we've all seen them, they're quite boring. So real life photos work well. Asking open questions, this is an interesting one. It can work well, but we are now again kind of moving to a bit of a general consumer psyche where we don't want to answer. We're a bit nervous about sharing too much of our personal life on social media. So if you're putting out some content that you're asking a question about, maybe you've put a poll up there. Polls can be fairly innocuous, so they are quite a good way to get some engaging content. But if you're asking an open question like, I don't know, what was your first job? Or those sort of funny little memes it could be. If you take the first letter of your mum's name and your maiden name, you get your Downton Abbey name. So really stupid things like that. But people are kind of cottoning on going, hang on, I'm giving away some personal information here. I'm not going to do that. So we're becoming a bit more savvy to it. So if you don't get a huge amount of engagement, don't be too disheartened, because as consumers, we are backing away from that. It might be that they've, you know, maybe saved the image, sent it to their family. So that dwell time, that's where that comes into play. So keep in mind what works. I'm not going to dwell on this, you can read it, and I'll send the slides out as we said. How are we doing for time? Oh, okay, crash on. So best times to post. Again, I would say this was kind of tail end of last year during lockdown. It has changed, particularly for things like LinkedIn, when commute time used to be a great time for engagement. There isn't much of a commute time now because most of us are going from upstairs to downstairs, bedroom to office, whatever it might be. So it has changed slightly. Again, I would say to you, go back to your insights always, because this is kind of a global thing. So weekends aren't shown that they're great for engagement and being the best time to post. But if you are maybe in the hospitality industry, if you have got something that people are typically looking for at a weekend, that could be the perfect time to post for you. So go into your analytics, go into your insights, and just see which time of day tends to work best for you, and see which posts work best for you as well. But I thought it was interesting to note, and a lot of the time, this 11 a.m. seems to be kind of a magic number. And I wonder if this is because it's the time we've done our morning meetings, kind of checked in with everything, and we're just having our tea break. So it's a great time to get that engagement. Okay, I'm going to whiz through these. These are some of the social updates that matter most that we have seen recently and are likely to see in the future. So I'm going to pick out a few. LinkedIn Live. Going live is huge at the moment. So if you're running an event, you're running a webinar, it's something you can do to kind of go live on, whether that is Instagram, Facebook. LinkedIn Live is coming. I personally don't have it yet, but I know some of my colleagues at Green Umbrella, so I'm curious to know if you have. So I can't talk to you too much about how it works, but one of the great things you often get with LinkedIn Live or Instagram Live is the notification. So that all important notification when we're logging in that might say, Anne's gone live. So people will kind of dip in and go, oh, what's she talking about? What's Anne talking about? They might not stay for the whole duration, but again, it's just keeping you on their radar. So virtual events and meetings, whilst we might all be a little bit zoomed out, and I'm grateful for your company this morning, there's still an appetite for it. So I wanted to talk about Clubhouse because that is a biggie at the moment. So I'd be interested to know how many of us are aware of Clubhouse, how many use it. It kind of became a bit of a phenomenon very quickly. So it's generally called a social audio platform. So Clubhouse, for those who aren't too familiar with it, is audio only. So it started as an invite-only platform. It's only available on Apple products, so on your iPhones. So they kind of created a bit of exclusivity around it. And what you do in Clubhouse is you kind of create your room, your event. You can invite people to speak, but there's no camera. So there's none of this, oh, what do I look like? Oh, do I need to kind of, dress from the waist upwards? Some people still kind of just wearing their pajamas on the lower half, let's face it. But so it's completely audio only. So those who are a little bit camera shy, works really well for them. In barely a year, because it's only been available since the first part of 2020, they have grown to 2 million weekly active users. I mean, it's crazy, crazy amount, to the point where they are now valued at, I'm just going to look at this. So the app was downloaded 2.3 million times in January this year. It's valued at over $1 billion. They have 9 employees. So it's crazy amount of growth. Does that mean that it will be a flash in the pan and not here for long? Well, some of the celebrities have embraced it because it allows them to broadcast to their followers, but they don't have to necessarily engage with them. So it's a bit of a broadcast platform. So people like Oprah Winfrey, Elon Musk, who else has been on it? Mark Zuckerberg, and everyone's favorite 90s rapper MC Hammer. So if you wanted to go on his Clubhouse, you could. But yes, it has been embraced by celebrities. And again, as I said, if something's gone well on one platform, it becomes a bit of a race to go out on other platforms. So there's a bit of a race on for some of the social media platforms to get behind it, and also those who are on Android, because the fact that it's Apple or iOS only, it does make it quite limiting. So there's kind of a race going on to see who can get there first. So Twitter Spaces has launched, which is their version of Clubhouse. It is only available to people who've got over 600 followers, whether that's company or personal, although it's not automatic. So I would say keep an eye, follow Twitter Spaces to see how you can get that rolled out for you. It's one of the benefits of using the newer platforms is that you're not competing for space. So whilst there might not be a huge amount of people that are there, you're not kind of jostling for that audience. So you could be an early adopter and make it work for you. So Instagram doing similar, they're launching live rooms at the moment for up to 4 people. It won't be long until the rest of the platforms get on board as well. On a personal level, I'm not a massive fan of Clubhouse, purely just timing, fitting it all in. I can't multitask. Some people will listen to it in the background while they're working. That doesn't work for me. I need to be engaged in one task at once. But I do know of people who have, and actually at Green Umbrella, we have got leads from it. So again, if you're looking for business that you want to convert, it could be a platform that you want to investigate, you want to look at. As I say, it is invite only at the moment. If anybody needs an invite, let me know. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I can make sure that because once you're in, they kind of give you a few invites. So I can make sure that we're in there. So that's very much a kind of keep an eye on it. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I generally don't think it's a flash in the pan. So yeah, that's one for the future. Okay, sharing experiences. I'm going to whiz over this one fairly quickly because it kind of came into being very much across lockdown. So it's a way of connecting with people. We had people going live, as I've said, on all the platforms. Twitter and LinkedIn are introducing stories, much like Instagram. I've talked about the auto captions. TikTok and TikTok challenges. I think it's worth a little mention of this because, oh my goodness, the adoption of TikTok was enormous last year. And not just in the kind of tweeny or teeny generation. Dance challenges, there was something that kept us entertained. Reels is the Instagram version, but it is a great way of creating some digestible video content. So even if you use TikTok or Reels to create your videos and then use them across other platforms. So video, as I said, as a platform, it's not going anywhere. If I talk about that as the future, it's almost kind of the past. If you're not doing video, you really should be in some way, shape or form. But these platforms now are making it easier for people who are not technical, don't have any editing experience, to create these videos. So, and they can be great fun as well. So if you want to show your personality and you want to share that experience of what it's like, so maybe what it's like to be in the iconic offices, what it's like to be in your bakery or your workshop or whatever it might be, a great way to share that experience and go behind the scenes. Social as a news source. As I said, we are increasingly going to social media to get our updates. That doesn't necessarily mean we trust the platforms. So again, there is some research around whether we'll go there, but will we believe it? So I think if it comes from what's seen as a credible news source, so for example, the BBC breaking news on Twitter, or one of the big American news platforms that is on Facebook, we will start to give that more credibility. But it's a way we go to get quick news feeds. So, that might be who's resigned in which sporting platform, when, like I said, when do restaurants open again? So Twitter are trying to make some changes. In fact, all the platforms are trying to make some changes to make sure that we trust their platforms. I like the fact that Twitter are actually calling theirs Birdwatch. So if we think that something's being spread and it is not trustworthy content, it's misinformation, it can be reported. They're trying to prompt you, Twitter, if you retweet a link that you haven't clicked. So if you see something you think, well, I think this is disgusting, and you retweet it and you haven't read the article to justify it, it will prompt you. So again, they're trying to revisit their platforms and algorithms to remove what they might call triggering content, or at least give a warning so that we can start to trust them as a credible news source. So worth keeping that in mind as well. One thing I do want to spend a moment on is social as a retail channel. So increasingly, social media is a place that we can go and get information about products and services, and we can just click a couple of buttons and buy something. I mean, how easy is it to buy a product or click on a service and purchase when we're online, especially if you've got your payment details set up on your phone, whether it's Apple Pay, whether it's PayPal. You know, click, 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 done, it's on its way to you. So 55% of people claim they have bought something through social media. 87% of people say social has influenced their decision. Video plays a huge part in that. If you can see someone using your product, and that could be anything, you know, from bath and beauty products, so makeup, bath bombs, that kind of thing, home products, whether it's a amazing screwdriver or a toolkit that you might need. If you can see it in action, you think, this is brilliant. You might go and then check out a few reviews, but again, click, click, off you go. The item's in your basket, and in a couple of days, it's on your doorstep. So, and as a retail channel, social media is becoming, you know, it's really adapting to that. So Facebook shops are coming to the UK and Canada. They are already in the US. So if you are an e-commerce platform, keep an eye for that if you haven't got it already. The Instagram shop function, again, is huge. So if you are a particularly consumer-facing business, it's worth investigating that if you haven't already. I mean, their ad revenue rocketed in the last year. You can now shop from Reels, which is their version of TikTok, so the video-based platform. So increasingly, there's going to be more options to shop and options for you to become a retailer through these channels. So potentially bad news for the high street, but if you are a small business and you can't afford premises, potentially great news for you. Let's talk about the Apple and Facebook data privacy feud. I wanted just to flag this because it is some important news and may impact whether you can or want to. It's something to keep an eye on. It's kind of very in the moment. So the latest iOS update, so the Apple operating system update, you can choose in there to have your data tracking taken off. Now, this is important because Facebook particularly, so there's the kind of feud is between Mark Zuckerberg and the guys at Apple, because Facebook will collect that data to present you with adverts, remarketing, so where you're retargeted on a website you've been to before, and present you with adverts and content that is tailored to that. So there's an argument to say, and I'm quite pro this because I want content that is tailored to me. You know, I don't want something that's completely irrelevant. I like the fact that I can buy things easily. It kind of takes some of the decision making out for me, and we all make way too many decisions in a day. So, so there are pros and cons, but then equally you get people going, well, I don't want to be tracked online. My data's my data. It's important to me. So something like 80% of people who this is relevant to, that have the new Apple update, are keeping their data hidden, which could impact small businesses, because if you are advertising on the likes of Facebook and Instagram, you know, if your ads aren't going to be tailored quite as much, will they still give you the results that you want? And I'm a big fan of we do it with our clients at Green Umbrella, of Facebook advertising, because it can be so targeted. You can follow the customer journey through, and it's not huge, it's not budget breaking. So you can do it to promote an event, promote a product, a couple of pounds a day, you can get some great results on that. So I think this is a very interesting development. If that is relevant to you, keep an eye on it, because it's ongoing at the moment and it could have big ramifications. So to sum up, because I have sneaked over time by just a couple of minutes, be where your audience are paying attention. So we've talked about kind of all these platforms, about Clubhouse, about Facebook. Make sure, and the future will always be where it's relevant to you. So Clubhouse might not be relevant to you at all. If your audience is more mature, stick to Facebook. That's where they're hanging out. So look at your data and your insights and be sensible about where you put your efforts. I did want to just share some useful sources where I get all my data. Social Media Today is a fantastic newsletter, comes out every Saturday, kind of collects up all these information. So talks about specific changes on social channels. Global Web Index is great for research about behavior, purchasing behavior, habits online, that kind of thing. And every month we do a social snippets at Green Umbrella. It's free, it's on our website. So kind of a shameless plug, but also it's just really useful. So you kind of, we snapshot all the updates there of what's happening on the social platforms. So hop on over, you can download it, and it's there every month for you as well. So I hope that was useful. Do connect with me on LinkedIn. Maybe I can try and get to a couple of questions, but I am conscious of time. So I'd be really happy to connect with people and share what I can.